I'm here today with Professor Bengt Saltin at GIHO and the Karolinska affiliation, where it really all began back in the late 50s and 60s. Bengt, thanks for being with me today.
Yeah.
It's great to be back in Stockholm and see you again.
Yeah, it's great to have you here,
Yeah.
and that you've taken this side trip on your way back home.
Yeah, no, it's always a pleasure visiting here.
Mm.
So, I guess given you grew up very active and orienteering, and then you studied medicine, was it always your wish to go into studying the physiology of exercise?
Oh, I had no such plans. As you know, orienteering is reasonably well known in Australia.
Yeah.
You know, that is running in the forest, finding checkpoints, and I was then doing that since early, almost childhood, and all my friends, they were related to work in the forest, so I was planning to be a forester myself on the academic level. But my mother just said, no, you have to study medicine. So I did.
Yeah. And following your medical studies, what brought you towards studying physiology and physiology of exercise?
Again, it wasn't really my choice. I was fortunate to have Ulf von Euler, late Nobel Prize winner in physiology, as the main lecturer, and he was also the one handling the oral examination. And at the end of that, and now we are at late 1957, he asked me if I wanted to stay on as a student instructor, and what do you say? I said yes, and then I started to help with labs with younger students and so on. And a little bit later, I was introduced to Erik Hove Christensen, who was the exercise physiology professor in Stockholm and a former pupil of Oxigeno. And 1959, I moved over to his laboratory and worked there the summer and also the summer of 1960. And when I was ready with my medical studies, 61, I started full-time on my PhD.
So your PhD work really looked at central cardiovascular function, heat stress, challenges to maximal oxygen uptake, and I guess that's been a major theme that you've followed over the years, hasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I got introduced to it. It was, the start was because Hove Christensen was rather close to Adolf, and he had done some studies during the Second World War, how to best get soldiers passing Sahara. And he had some very, very interesting observations that depending upon the heat stress, you lost more of your plasma volume if it was pure heat stress. But if there was an exercise component, you maintained your blood volume better. Especially then because of not that much loss of the plasma volume. And so a theme in my thesis was if that was really true, and then how it affected the cardiovascular functions.
Yeah.
And they have stayed on in that field.
Yes. Now, not long after you finished your PhD, you spent some time in Dallas, and it's fair to say that the Dallas bed rest study is really a classic in the field. How did that come about?
Yeah, it was pure luck, I would say. They had got quite large money, the cardiopulmonary unit at the Southwestern Medical School in Dallas, and they had 2 floors to equip, and the whole thing was then to be prepared to do this Dallas bed rest and training study. And for reasons I don't know, I was contacted by the present chief there, Charlton B. Chapman, and also by Jerry Mitchell. And I moved over there in 1966 in January, and we started the study in May that year. But to have all that money, equip the laboratory, get the equipment going, it was a fantastic time. And it was an offer, and I couldn't say no to that.
Yes. Yeah. The other interesting innovation, the experimental innovation, was the knee extension model, which you developed when you were in Copenhagen. How did you think about that, and how has that added to our understanding of the physiological responses?
Yeah, Niels Secker, also very active in Copenhagen, he did write an article demonstrating that when you added arm exercise to exercising leg, and the exercising leg, they kept the same exercise intensity, then they saw a drop when the arms got on. And that was part of his thesis work, and no one really believed that that could happen, that the blood flow to exercising muscle, that was in part shut down. So then the idea come up that the heart really was the limiting factor when you were exercising pretty hard and with a large muscle group. And to really be able to study that properly, I thought one had to have an exercise model where you could adjust the amount of muscle involved in the exercise. So that's the basis for that knee extension type of exercise. And then in addition to being very helpful in sorting out some of the limiting issues in regard to cardiac function, it became a very good model to study metabolism in the exercising muscles. You got like an isolated muscle intact in the human body.
Yes. Speaking of limitations to VO2 max, there's always been a long-standing debate in our field about limits to VO2 max, oxygen delivery, oxygen utilization. You've always been a strong believer in the central role of the heart, and that the cardiac function is limiting. Why do you believe that?
Yeah, I think all evidence are in favor of having that view.
Yeah.
I mean, we started, for example, one study with just one leg, added the other leg, and then we added an arm, and then we added 2 arms. And it's so easy to see that depending upon the capacity of the heart, the relationship between blood flow and exercise intensity start to fall off when you add too much muscle mass and of course also high intensity. So I mean, I can't see that one can discuss the very central role of the heart capacity for delivering enough with the oxygen to the skeletal muscles when exercising. There is a peripheral component, but it isn't the mitochondria has been written so much about. Our more recent studies demonstrate capillaries are essential, but not the mitochondrial volume. Yeah. We have an extra capacity, most of us, in our skeletal muscle to handle the oxygen that can be delivered.
The other, you've utilized the muscle biopsy technique over many years, and you've been along with all of the developments around fiber type, muscle metabolites, and even more recently with gene expression. How has that technique helped advance our understanding in exercise physiology?
A very important tool, Jonas Bergström, who then in a way designed the needle, but it is a copy of the needle that Duchenne used and described 1852 in Paris, but almost an exact copy of it. But anyway, it opened up for taking biopsies from most muscles of the human body. Most people don't say, I mean, they feel something, but it's usually not painful at all. But it opened up to get muscle tissues at rest after exercise. You could look for glycogen depletion, and you could look for fat consumption and so on in the muscle. So it was a completely new field open up. Of course, there were some data from primarily rats at that time, but you know, the fiber type composition, for example, glycogen and fat content in the rat muscle is different from the human muscle. So it opens up a completely new sphere. And I'm happy to see how it developed rather quickly around the world to use that biopsy needle.
Yeah. And finally, I know you followed up with the Dallas bed rest participants, you know, 20 or 30 years later, and 30 years later, and you would be telling me recently you've got a lot of data on long-term training cyclists. So I guess from all the work you've done, there's pretty powerful evidence that regular exercise is beneficial as you get older.
Yeah, if we take the study, it's still unpublished, but it's finished in the laboratory where we have bicyclists who have been on the top level from childhood, or at least as teenagers, all the way up to being 60 to 70 years old. So we have 12 of those in Denmark, and then we have equal number who have been, you know, typical Danish bicyclists just using their bicycle to and from work, and then a group that have been inactive, and it's spectacular the difference between these groups. And you could say it's selection, part of it is probably selection, but the function especially of the cardiovascular system is unbelievable in this still active old bicyclists. I mean, you can't distinguish them from young, reasonably trained 20, 25, 30-year-old people. And the dynamics of the heart today, you know, with magnetic resonance technique, you can study some of those things, and it's literally impossible to say this is a young guy and this is an old guy. They are the same.
Bengt, thank you for joining me today. It's been a pleasure. As I've said to you, for me personally, you had a major impact on my career. The first paper I ever read was your Wolf lecture that was published in MedSci Sports and Exercise, and I remember reading that in the library and saying, I think I need to work in this area, and you've certainly supported me over the years, and you've been an inspiration for many people around the world. So thank you for spending time with me today at GIHO, where it all started for you. So.
Thank you very much for coming and bringing up, you know, lots of old nice memories, and also having had you in Copenhagen working with us has been very much a stimulation. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Bengt.